Joining me now from Jerusalem is Avi Mayer, founder of the Jerusalem Journal. Good morning and welcome, Avi.
Good morning, Audie. Good to be with you.
Now, we saw the images of those protests and also seeing tweets from kind of the Hostage Family Forum warning Netanyahu not to expand the war to Hamas because they say that it puts the hostages' lives in greater danger. Can you talk about what their request is and what that pressure means for the Israeli government?
Sure. Look, this is a war that initially had very broad support in Israel. Israelis understood in the aftermath of October 7th that Hamas needed to be removed as a threat, seeing as they continued to threaten that they would carry out more and more October 7th-like massacres until Israel was destroyed. That is no longer the case. There is now broad support in Israel for ending the war. Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of Israelis say that the time has come for an overall deal that would end the war and see those hostages return. And that's essentially what those hostage families are calling for. They're calling for all efforts to bring this war to a close and to have their loved ones returned home. Now, that, of course, would entail the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. It would entail the release of a certain number of convicted Palestinian terrorists in Israeli prisons. Those are two demands that are opposed by members of Netanyahu's government, but that is a position that many Israelis have reached at this time.
Can you talk about the timing of this video? I mean, just a few days ago, obviously, people were looking at these images of starving people in Gaza, and then over the weekend, you have Hamas releasing video of starving hostages. What do you read in this moment?
Well, it's interesting to sort of look at Hamas's psychology. They've done this quite a few times, released these really horrific videos showing the terrible state in which these hostages are being kept. They beg for their lives. And it's very clearly meant as a message to the Israeli public that this is a moment to press your government to make certain concessions in order to bring about some kind of a deal. But we know, of course, that at least according to President Trump, his envoy, Steve Witkoff, and of course, Israeli officials, as you mentioned, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of interest in Hamas's part to actually come to some kind of reasonable compromise. In fact, they seem to be hardening their stances every single day, which is a position I think that they can get to because of the tremendous international pressure that Israel has been subjected to over the past 2 weeks due to the images of hunger in Gaza. And so I think that's the position they're trying to push right now, to sort of push Israel to sort of compromise on those things that it feels, at least up until this point, it hasn't been able to compromise on, and see if they're able to get a more favorable deal at some point in the future.
Over the weekend, I was looking at your social media posts, and you said, I know many people are concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. I am too. But are you equally concerned about this? And you were showing one of the images that Hamas has put out of a 24-year-old Israeli hostage who's been held captive for 666 days. Can you talk about the reaction to that post? What were you trying to say?
Look, that image had, to be perfectly frank, the intended effect as far as Hamas is concerned. It horrified Israelis. It called for some of the hostage families to say, you know what, this is the time to just concede defeat. We need to do whatever we can to bring these people home. They are in imminent danger. That is exactly what Hamas wanted. But the truth is that it aligns with where many Israelis are at this point, that we have sort of exhausted whatever military objectives there had been at the outset of this war, that Hamas has been decimated as a fighting force. There's not much more to achieve. And this is a point in which we basically need to call it quits and pull out. And so I think it sort of feeds a sentiment that is already somewhat existent within Israeli society, but it does so in such a cruel and horrific way, knowing, by the way, that while this does in fact impact many Israelis, it doesn't have nearly the same impact around the world. I can tell you that that image appeared on the front pages of every Israeli newspaper yesterday and on one international newspaper, the New York Post. I didn't see it anywhere else, as opposed to the horrific images we saw the week before of emaciated children in Gaza. I think that sends a very powerful message as well, that Hamas knows exactly what buttons to push and what impact it'll have, and what impact, quite frankly, it won't have. I think that's quite sobering as well.
Avi Mayer, founder of the Jerusalem Journal. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.